I was standing at the back of my class, and I suddenly became aware that all of my students were staring at me, staring at these three numbers on the board. They looked concerned at my concentration, and one asked if I was okay. I answered, I probably wrote those because it looks like my handwriting, but I can't remember. That is the moment I realized that the knock on the head from a tumble in the stairs at school the week before was probably something more than just a headache. When I had fallen, I had twisted my knee, and I was so worried about it, I didn't even think about what felt like a minor bump to the head. But at the urging of some colleagues, I canceled my weekend bike trip and finally went to the doctor. When I was diagnosed with post concussion syndrome, and even in the months that followed, I didn't realize the range of symptoms. I was often attributing my bad moods to the lack of sleep and the lack of sleep on my lack of exercise, and it was a vicious cycle, but I wasn't attributing it to my PCS. Post concussion syndrome is complex and can appear even a week after a concussion. Sometimes symptoms can go away after a week or two, sometimes they last for a year or more. It's kind of like an iceberg. I look fine, but underneath there are all these underlying symptoms: headaches, fatigue, irritability, insomnia, loss in concentration, problems with memory, personality changes, confusion, difficulty processing, noise and light sensitivity, anxiety, and depression. My symptoms in the first months were mostly cognitive difficulties and noise and light sensitivity. Over time, my symptoms have changed. Some have become more pronounced and some less. The frustrating part was finally finding a coping strategy for symptoms, only to have them all change and having to start all over again. And I was always so exhausted. And as I was fighting through this, I was teaching. As someone who had spent the previous 5 years as a district teacher mentor giving workshops and bettering my practice, I was not okay with just being average. I had also spent a week at Space Camp for Educators at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center and had all these amazing missions I wanted my little agents to experience. The hardest part was letting go of the expectations I had for myself, of my fear of being judged for telling teachers something for 5 years and not doing it myself, and things I had no control over, like the lack of consistent TOCs. I also had to let go of the way I wanted to teach. Small groups didn't work for me because the multiple conversations were too distracting. I spoke with my students about my changing symptoms, and we worked together on being mindful of what was going on around us and the noise we were creating. I shared the strategies I was using to calm myself down, and we found the best ways to get my attention when I had my headphones on. We also talked about how my phone was there to take notes and set reminders, not because I was disengaged with what they were doing. Often students would recognize I was about to hit my limit before I did. They said they could tell by my eyes. They would bring me my headphones, and if anyone came into the class and turned on the fluorescent lights, a little agent would jump up and turn it off. We started gardening at recess, taking the class outside for reading, walking in the forest, or just going outside to watch the clouds, as being outside helped with my symptoms. These kids have demonstrated so much empathy and have learned to be autonomous and to rely on each other. Take my first day of teaching. I walked in after lunch, went to start my sentence, and got one word out before I burst into tears. As I went to the cloakroom to get it together, they took out their projects, and I heard one say, "If anyone needs help, come see me. I think I've got this." One of our biggest coping strategies was humor, which came in handy when my most pronounced symptom became mood swings. I would be happy and having a great time with my students, then something would trigger a change. A student whistling, any loud noise or sudden movement really, a metal water bottle falling onto the floor, and I was a completely different person. Bruce Banner had nothing on me. Students would tell each other to stop talking or stop making noise, or else the Hulk would come out. On mornings when I was already on edge before leaving the house, I wore green on its warning. The Hulk's appearances were also a way of judging my improvement. "You haven't turned into the Hulk for 3 days," a student high-fived me as he walked out of class. I never really knew how to talk about mental health with my younger students before, but this was a great way to get into the subject. They were seeing my good and my really bad days. They were learning that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to ask for help. They were becoming resilient to the constant changes in the classroom, and they were more mindful of their mental health as well. When I was having a really bad day, someone would inevitably ask, "When is the next time you see Jeff?" Jeff is my counselor. We often just sat around and chatted, and students shared about their difficulties, their strategies, and experience with counselors. A student who'd been having a bad year decided it was time to see a counselor as well. Next week, it'll be 7.5 months since my accident, and I will finally be going back to work full time. But I still have anxiety about my symptoms, never knowing what will set them off and who or what will be available for help. When we are on crutches or have a cast, people are constantly reminded that we're injured. With post concussion syndrome, I'm an iceberg. Just because you can't see my injury, it doesn't mean it is not there.